Hello everyone, welcome to Mr. Noctory. Tonight, we're diving into one of the least celebrated jobs in human history, the Roman Empire's public toilet scrubber. A career full of opportunities, in the most literal, messy sense. Latrina, Rome's version of a public restroom. The smell of vinegar, garum fish sauce, and human presence. The fragrance of historical failure. Scrubbing bowls, flushing with hope, breathing through sheer faith. People came here to relieve themselves, in every possible sense of the word. Before we begin, if you truly find this a cozy place to shelter in the late hours, go ahead and like and subscribe. But only if you really want to. It's like the old tavern rule. You only enter when you need a quiet corner. And you know what I love the most? Reading the comments, seeing where you're from and what time it is. Whether it's New York or Norway, 1 in the morning or 5 in the morning, you're here and I see you. Now, turn off the lights. Turn on a little fan if you have one. Not because it's hot, but for that soft humming sound. You're about to become an ancient Roman public toilet scrubber. Sounds funny, but trust me, this role is both filthy and sacred. No sword, no medals, just a stick, a shared sponge, and a fragile belief that today might be slightly better than yesterday. Rome, city of myths, philosophers, and human waste. Between glory and disillusion, there are canals running beneath the earth, where everything flows, and where empires must bow to, the digestive system. Rome may boast the Colosseum, the Pantheon, and a parade of marble gods. But don't forget, they all pass through here first. You won't be worshipped, no wreaths laid for you. Meanwhile, Mercury, who just delivered mail, has temples and festivals. But think about it. When people pray for blessings, who cleans up that blessing at the end of the day? You are not sacred, but you deal with the aftermath of sacredness. This isn't just a drain. It's the city's underground memory. It remembers what people want to forget. Secrets never carved into stone, but etched deep in the sewer mud. One night, you bend down and realize a name might disappear from the history books, but their scent still lingers somewhere down here. A philosopher once sat at this latrina, talking about the soul while tending to the body. A dreamy poet once tossed his manuscript into the current after rejection. And then there are quiet souls, like you, who keep other people's dreams from smelling like rot. Every drop, every drip beneath the earth is a historical whisper. I once held an emperor's poop. Sometimes you hear rats skittering across the vaults, water dripping from a cracked ancient stone, footsteps echoing, or maybe just memory. You stand in darkness, the smell of vinegar and thyme clinging to your skin. Above you, the living city. Beneath your feet, the stream of memories no one wants to remember. And you understand, this is not hell. This is civilization's basement, and you are its gatekeeper. No one sees you. No one asks your name. But if you disappear, people notice instantly. Some live their whole lives like that, quiet, unseen, holding the world up from underneath. If you're listening to this in the middle of the night, with tired eyes and a weary heart, you know that feeling. The feeling of being forgotten, but still going, still cleaning, still existing. You don't need light to matter. Maybe, just maybe, it's because you live in the dark, that others get to live in the light. You open your eyes, not because of light. The room you're in doesn't even know what light is. Not because of birdsong, where you live. The only soundtrack is running water, but because of a familiar cautionary sound, plop, echoing from the alley behind your clay wall. Not exactly soothing background music. It's the overture of Rome's public digestive system. You're lying on an old straw mattress. It smells like people, many people. The ceiling is made of damp wood, dripping water onto your face. You don't flinch. You're used to it. What truly wakes you is the sound of someone emptying a chamber pot into the gutter, then whistling as they walk away, as if nothing happened. You pull yourself up. Your spine makes a noise like a rusted dungeon door. Every vertebra reminds you that you slept on old straw, not a bed, and that you're no longer a teenager. Your calves feel like they've been licked by a cat all night. Your shoulders ache as if you dreamed about fighting and lost. You try to stretch, but instead of relief, you hear a crackling chorus, like a statue of a god fracturing in an earthquake. You bend over. Your back cracks like a paving stone long overdue for replacement. You reach for your destined tool, the inseparable stick with a darkened sponge at the end, which you always pretend not to examine too closely. No time to brush your teeth. Brush with what? Clean water is a sacred resource. And if you did have a sip, you'd rather swallow your sorrow than rinse your mouth. Toothbrush, you have a stick. Toothpaste, you have salt and prayers. Of course you don't use them. You choose to rinse your mouth with hope and spit out reality. No one's waiting for you to eat breakfast. Just a bucket, a rag, and a whisper in your head saying, "If no one throws up in the latrina today, I'll take it as a miracle." You step out the door. No one greets you. The bread seller turns away at the sight of you, as if your gaze alone could make his loaves mold. A child playing near the drainage ditch stops when you pass, not out of fear, but trying to understand why a grown-up smells like last night's dinner for the entire neighborhood. Even the cat, your supposed best friend, gives you a look that says, "Sorry, I just can't," and walks away like a civilized citizen, choosing not to breathe through the nose. Rome still sleeps, but the trash is already awake. You see a cat glance at you and run off, as if even it couldn't stand your smell. You begin your day before the sun, not to conquer the world, but to clean it, one streak, one puddle, one ignored plop at a time. You arrive, not at the Pantheon, where people gaze up at the Holy Dome, not at Jupiter's temple, where incense and hope rise into the heavens. You arrive at the place where, if any god ever passed by, they left very, very quickly. The Colosseum has the blood of warriors. The latrina has what the warriors left behind. Here, the ceiling isn't high, but the smell reaches heaven. No statues, only stone holes facing each other like empty eyes, staring at you, demanding endless service. Latrina, the public toilet, or more accurately, the temple of everything most profane Rome ever produced. A long stone room, no partitions, no doors, no privacy. A row of stone seats with holes. Each hole, a chapter in the memoir no one wants to write. The air here is thick, not with dust, but with decaying past lives. It doesn't just hit your nose, it clings to your memory. It nests in your pores. It makes you smell latrina even in your dreams. The scent of old vinegar, human waste and regret hovers like a thin mist. Somewhere you hear a blub. Could be gas bubbles. Could be something else. The ceiling drips water. Each drop falls like a countdown. How long until you can't take it anymore and quit this job? You enter like a priest stepping into a sacrificial chamber. Except here, you clean the altar. After the worshippers, have silently retreated. Every motion, rinsing the sponge, scrubbing around the stone holes, is a ritual, a silent one. No music, no chanting, just the sound of rag against stone, and your breathing through a blocked nose. Your name will never be in the history books. But you know, there's no greater ritual than keeping Rome from drowning in its own humanity. The stone seats are cold and wet. You don't ask why. On the wall, a handprint, maybe from someone who slipped, or someone overcome with emotion while pouring their heart out. On the floor, a rag older than you. It has served many. It's been tossed out, then picked up again when replacements ran out. You take a breath through your mouth. Your hand grips the tersorium, a sponge on a stick, intimately shared by hundreds, rinsed with vinegar when there's any left. You see no one, but you know they've sat here. The flickering oil lamp casts your warped shadow on the wall, unclear if you're a person or a ghost. The space thickens, more than the smell, as if you're walking through memories long forgotten. You are the cleaner, but also the rememberer. No need to write anything down. The scent has already carved itself into every wrinkle of your mind. You see a small scratch on the wall, a line etched by fingernail. Lucius was here. He regretted it. You chuckle softly. No one comes to the latrina in peace, but all leave, a little lighter. Thieves, nobles, soldiers, slaves, all sit side by side. Here everyone is equal, at least in squatting position. There are no thrones in the latrina. No one sits higher than anyone else. Even if you once slew 1,000 enemies in battle here, you still have to wait your turn. You once saw a senator and a beggar sitting next to each other, silent, staring forward, both straining. This is the only place in Rome where equality isn't a slogan. It's biological. Some spots still echo. One hole is clogged. Below, you hear the bubbles of nostalgia rising. You bend down, hands trembling. Not from disgust, but because you haven't eaten. You begin your work. Scrub, wipe, flush. Gentle on the fragile parts, firm on the clingy stuff. You work in silence. Footsteps outside, someone's coming. You retreat into the shadows, not to hide, but because you are part of the wall now, the invisible guardian of the empire's hygiene. It lies in the bucket, like a sword long abandoned, not shiny, no golden hilt, just a straight wooden stick, topped with a sponge whose original color is long forgotten. This is the tersorium, the inseparable tool of every Roman public toilet. There's a legend that the first tersorium was gifted to humankind by the hygiene goddess Hygeia while she was drunk, and she's regretted it ever since. The cleaner's staff, but also the intimate companion of all social classes, from slaves to nobles. You pick it up like you're picking up fate itself. If Excalibur chose its wielder by rising from a sacred lake, the tersorium chose you by making you bend down to grab it in despair, surrounded by scents that never made it into myth. If this stick could talk, it would probably scream every time someone picked it up, "Please, use vinegar." But it stays silent, a warrior of endurance, a reluctant witness to everything Rome tried to bury. It's damp, cold, and slightly soft, but not in a good way. In theory, users would dip it into a water trench running underneath, sometimes mixed with vinegar. But you know, vinegar is rare. Water runs dry. The concept of hygiene doesn't exist in the Roman dictionary. You once saw someone rinse it with just a whistle and place it back like they'd done a good deed. You're the one who checks it, wrings it, scrubs it, and prays the sponge won't fall off mid-use. Because if it falls, that's not just a workplace accident. Every time the sponge falls off the stick, the entire latrina freezes in horror. It's the kind of moment that makes everyone wonder, what did I do in a past life to deserve witnessing this sanitary disaster? It's human tragedy at the level of psychological trauma. The tersorium is part of the collective body. In Rome, politics, religion, and class always divided people. But the tersorium is living proof that when facing the most basic of human needs, we all must share. It's the most literal symbol of community bonding. You think about quitting, but then you look at the stick and sigh. At least it doesn't talk. If it ever told stories, I'd have to burn all of Rome just to clean it out. You dip it into the vinegar bucket. A soft sound rises, like a gentle sob. And then you step toward the next stone hole, sponge stick in hand. Like a hero no one asked for, but everyone depends on. You begin moving from hole to hole. Not a stroll through Rome's grand avenues. This is a journey unfit for anyone with a sensitive nose. First comes the faint sourness of vinegar, almost pleasant. Then layers upon layers of smells, none of which appear in any dictionary. A whiff like forgotten cheese fermenting in an arena. Another like a leather sandal left soaking in rain all winter. And then burnt bread someone tried to hide at the bottom of a pot. You close your eyes. The tersorium moves like a sword. You wield it like a seasoned dancer. Too bad your only audience is a row of emotionless stone holes that never clap. A performance no one wants to watch, and you don't want to perform. You reach the third hole. The scent here is nostalgic. Could be garum, fermented fish sauce, the national flavor. Always a test for the toilet scrubber's nose. Or maybe it's the smell of sorrow from someone who cried while relieving themselves. You're not sure, but you feel it. The fourth hole is worse. You don't want to think about why. Because in this job, you've learned, never ask why, never ask whose. Just scrub fast, wipe thoroughly, and walk away like you've won a grand battle. At the fifth hole, you're hit with a strange combo. Jasmine and dead fish. Could be a noble who just left a banquet. Or a soldier trying too hard to impress a lover with too much perfume. You think to yourself, Rome is a place where everyone wants to look good. But eventually, we all meet here, in our least glamorous position. Sometimes, you dream of another life. One without sponge sticks, without vinegar, without silent tears dripping onto cold stone. But the dream ends quickly, because you've just reached hole number 6, and the smell here wakes you up forever. You near the 7th hole. Legend says anyone who's cleaned this one was never the same again. Suddenly, a man walks in, looks at you gratefully, and softly says, "Thanks, mate. I went a bit too hard on the garum today." You just nod, silently understanding everything. You finish your round of cleaning feeling like you've completed a scent marathon. You want to eat something delicious to erase it all. But you're afraid even the tastiest meal will remind you of today. You stand there, tersorium in hand, nose burning, whispering to yourself, "Everyone has hard roads to walk. Mine just smells worse." You inhale through your mouth, regain composure, and move forward. Because in Rome, someone has to do this job. And today, that someone is you. After a morning of fierce battle with your sponge stick, you're now allowed a pause. But don't dream of a lavish meal. You sit down in a quiet, relatively corner of your rented room. On the table sits a loaf of bread, not soft, fragrant bread, but a solid brick. Its smell, mostly old wheat, sometimes mixed with a bit of street dust from the road nearby. You take a bite. Your teeth crackle like you're chewing gravel. Each bite is a battle between hunger and dental pain. It's so hard you once seriously considered using it to smack a rat. You even thought about using it as bathroom tile, because it's just that durable. You know you can't give up. Someone has to survive these things. And today, that someone is you. Next to the brick bread sits a water jug. Not clean, purified water, but well water, with a mossy smell you try to ignore. You take a sip, sigh, and silently think, I'm sure I've eaten better bread before. I just can't remember when. You try to recall a moment, far away, when bread was soft and people's hearts were warm. Maybe it was Saturnalia last year, or just a hunger dream you mistook for memory. Even that overly salty stew from the other day now seems oddly appealing in retrospect. The house rat watches you chew and shakes its head in pity. It turns away, choosing to eat mouldy orange peel instead of sharing your brick. The stray cat outside the window looks in with compassion, a gaze only souls who've truly lived can give. You glance out the small window and see children playing in the sunlight. They don't know that out here, you're wrestling with the toughest piece of bread in all of Rome. You wonder, has anyone ever thought your job would be easier, if only the bread was softer? When you finish, you get up, yank on your dust-covered coat, and prepare for the long afternoon. Because you know, bread like bricks is temporary. The sponge stick is the eternal companion. You return to work, not with hunger, but with heaviness. A piece of bread is still stuck between your right molars. But time waits for no one, especially not the time of collective digestion. You pick up your sponge stick again. This time it feels slightly lighter, not because you're less tired, but because you've accepted your fate. If I'm Rome's sphincter guardian, then let me do it with dignity. You continue to wipe, clean, flush. No one pats your back. No one asks, are you okay? But you know, if you disappeared for a day, the latrina would flood. If you put down the stick for an hour, the whole street would know your name, not with praise, but by scent. You walk past a group of Roman soldiers returning to camp. They laugh, reek of sweat and wine. You don't join them. You quietly turn, avoiding the new odors soon to arrive. You see a child playing near the latrina. He asks his mother, "Who's that person?" She shakes her head. "Just someone who works there, sweetie. Just someone." You smile. You imagine that if there were ever a parade honoring laborers, you'd be the one cleaning up at the end, picking up scraps of paper, wiping grease stains, in silence, when everyone's gone home and forgotten someone is still on their knees. You're used to that phrase, but then you look up, see smoke rising from the public bath. People are relaxing, laughing, smelling nice, and they have no idea that to do so, someone had to clean up every trace they left behind. The Romans have gods of fire, love, wine, but no one builds a temple for you, even though you're the one who keeps them from suffocating. No one remembers your name, but if you vanished one day, the whole street would learn it, not in praise, but in smell. Yet everyone breathes because of you. No one thanks you, but everyone hopes you're still alive tomorrow. You keep walking, alone, in the dark, with your stick and the patience of someone who understands. Keeping Rome clean is how we stop the world from collapsing under its own stench. You return after a long day. No fireworks. No one opens the door for you. Just the faint ripping sound of your shirt peeling off your skin. Sweat dried, then wet again, then dried once more. The smell of vinegar, sewers, and poorly digested bread sticks like wet paint. And no one wants to touch you. You used to think the smell would go away. Turns out, it moves into memory. It lingers in your hair, your shirt, the creases of your fingers. And sometimes, you're not sure if what you're remembering is a person or a scent. You sit down, or rather collapse, onto the old straw. Not to rest, but to let your head stop holding everything up. You exhale, then inhale, and realize, this room smells like me. You think about bathing, but then remember, bathing is a luxury. Clean water isn't for someone who works where filth lives. And most of all, you're too tired to care. You close your eyes. No sweet dreams. In your dreams, you're still scrubbing, still bending down. You're chasing something, maybe the tesorium, but it keeps drifting away in the water. The plop echoes through your dream like war drums, awakening the horror. Other people hear lullabies when they sleep. You have a playlist of plops, static hums, and sponge stick scrubbing. At first, you try to wake up. Then you learn to sleep, with those sounds as background music. You wake in the middle of the night. The old rat in the corner looks up at you, then closes its eyes again, as if it's used to the scent you now carry, both day and dream. The stray cat outside taps the wooden door gently, not for food, just to say it's still there also, not sleeping. No one beside you. No one calls your name. You try to remember the last time someone placed a hand on your shoulder, not to give orders, just to ask how you're doing. You can't recall. You don't know if you're dreaming or still on the clock. Outside, the wind blows. Someone is vomiting. You no longer react. You turn your face to the wall, breathe through your mouth. You've survived another day. But you also know, this job doesn't end when you stop. It merely goes silent, waiting for you to return. You don't know what day it is. Rome doesn't rest, and neither does the smell. You no longer count time by sunrise, but by the number of rags changed, special stains encountered, and how many times the tesorium slipped from your hand in despair. No one calls you a hero. People talk about Hannibal crossing the Alps. You cross dozens of slippery meters of latrina every day. No elephants, no army, just a sponge stick and patience. No songs are written about you. No statue stands tall in your honor. But you know, every time someone walks out of a latrina with a peaceful face, it's because of you. How many shoes have you saved from mysterious puddles? How many times have you wiped off scribbled poetry from the walls, so someone else can return tomorrow to write a tragic love story with an unknown substance? You don't do this for glory. You do it because if no one gets dirty, then no one gets clean. You live among the smells, but you do not rot. You sit among filth, but you do not decay. You bow your head, but you are not small. Rome is remembered for Caesar, for victories, for the arena. But let's ask, Caesar may have conquered Gaul, but could he scrub the sponge for 12 people in a row who refused to flush? Rome survives because of people like you. Maybe you're hearing this now, and you too were someone no one greeted, no one asked. But you know, if you stop, the whole system collapses. You're the part no one sees, but everything stands because of you. They sculpt statues of gods, and you You scrub those statues after the pigeons. Voice their opinions on Jupiter's forehead. You don't need light, because you are the reason others can step into darkness without slipping. If you're still awake, if you're lying there in the darkness of your own, no lights, no one beside you, then I want to tell you this. I see you. You, the one who does things no one praises. You, the one who holds it together every day. But when someone asks, "Are you okay?" you just nod, because you don't want to trouble anyone. You, the one who walks into a room, and sometimes no one looks back. You've asked yourself, do I even really exist? I understand. And you know what? You're not alone. Throughout history, people like you, the ones whose names aren't written in books, whose statues aren't carved, they are the ones who kept everything from falling apart. Like the Roman latrina guardian. No one remembered the face. No one carved the name. But without them, the whole city would drown in chaos, in waste, in smell. You're the same. Whatever you do, you are the piece the world is quietly leaning on. So now, you're allowed to rest. You're allowed to close your eyes. You don't have to prove anything tonight. You don't have to be strong. You don't have to smile. You don't have to be okay. You only need to know someone is telling this story, and it's for you, because you survived, because you're still here, and because even if you felt invisible, tonight you are everything that remains in this story. Good night. May the smell drift away, may the dream soften, and tomorrow, may you wake up with no need for a stick, no need for vinegar, just your heart still beating quietly, like a hero in the dark. Anikejabagan, the first school of mankind, the first education in Sumer, Mesopotamia. The first school in human history is believed to have originated in ancient Mesopotamia, specifically in the city-states of Sumer, around 3,000 years before the Common Era. These earlier schools were called adaba, meaning tablet house in Sumerian. They were places of learning, where young students, mostly from elite families, were educated in subjects such as reading, writing, mathematics, literature, religion, and government administration. Adaba schools were often attached to temples or palaces and were run by priests or scribes serving as teachers. Education in these schools was primarily focused on training future scribes, since literacy and record-keeping were essential skills for administrative and bureaucratic roles in society. Students in ancient Mesopotamian schools would learn cuneiform, the earliest known form of writing, by carving characters into clay tablets. They also studied arithmetic, including basic calculations and units of measurement. Literature, such as epic poetry and historical tales, was taught to convey cultural values and historical awareness. While Adaba schools are recognized as the earliest formal educational institutions, it's worth noting that education in more informal contexts likely existed long before. In prehistoric times, knowledge and skills were passed down orally, as older generations shared their wisdom and expertise with younger members of the community. This informal education was crucial to the survival and development of early human societies. The ground is as hard as sun-dried brick. There's no bed. You're lying on an old goatskin beneath a cracked mud roof in Mesopotamia, some 5,000 years ago. No alarm clocks, just your mother yelling from the yard, "Get up and go to school, or the teacher will beat you dead." You're 7 years old, your hair is dusty, Your hands are covered in dry mud and a bit of old blood. Because yesterday, you wrote one cuneiform symbol wrong, and your teacher's stick has no sense of humor. No backpack, just a half-burnt flatbread and a clay tablet nearly the weight of a chicken. You carry it on your shoulder, like you're carrying your family's destiny. Because if you don't learn how to write the word grain, people might think your family hasn't paid enough grain tribute. And then, your father might be taken away to be sacrificed to some bull-headed god. You step outside. The sun feels like it's on fire. The road to school is only 300 meters, but it feels as long as a whole life you're not sure you'll live through. The school has a sweet name, E-Dubba, the House of Tablets. But you know it's not sweet. It's the place you'll squat for 6 hours a day, on the ground, with the teacher's stick always lurking within sight. You arrive. Everyone's already there. One kid is crying. One just got punished and is wiping blood from his nose with his shirt. No one talks. Just the sound of clay tapping wooden stylus, steady as the heartbeat of tension. You sit down. You sigh, and you start scratching onto the clay tablet, a strange symbol you still can't tell if it means cow or flatbread. Welcome to humanity's first school, a place not for dreams, but for survival. You thought ancient people studied to broaden the mind. No. They studied to avoid beatings, trickery, or being dragged off to be sacrificed to the gods. According to archaeological records, the Sumerian civilization, located in Mesopotamia, was the first to form a systematic concept of school. Not to inspire creativity, but to serve the government and the gods. Schools like E-Dubba were built next to temples because students were expected to become scribes for priests and nobles. If you spelled a god's name wrong, the priest might let the god deal with you, quickly. Before we talk writing, look at their school supplies. No textbooks, they had clay tablets. No ink pens, they had sharp sticks or animal bones called stylus. Clay tablets were as heavy as paving stones, and when you made a mistake, you had to crush the whole thing and start over. No quick fix with backspace. The first writing wasn't born for poetry. It was born to count. Specifically, how many sacks of grain were offered to the temple? Who still owes 2 goats from last month's festival? And who claimed a sheep that wasn't theirs? When one wrong symbol could get your whole family executed, learning became a ticket into elite survival. Even knowing how to count livestock meant you could work as a scribe for temples or nobles. No digging, no herding. You recorded, calculated, kept records. And most importantly, you lived. Learning to write, no matter how boring, how painful, how dry, was a matter of survival. No report cards, no GPA rankings. Just 2 outcomes. Write correctly, become a scribe, live in a roofed house, eat barley porridge for breakfast. Write wrong, get listed for God sacrifice, or worse, accused of stealing beer, and then your whole family gets kicked out of the village. The first schools in human history were not nurseries for brilliance. They were gambling dens, where entire family futures were staked on a 7-year-old child. If that child was smart, careful, and precise, the family would have a place in society. If that child dropped out, or simply misspelled a god's name, then the one sacrificed might be the father. It was a training ground for society's immune system. Children who learned how to survive in a world that didn't forgive mistakes. Archaeologists have found many student tablets. Some even say things like, "I will no longer confuse meat with sacrificial offering," repeated 20 times. It could be a punishment, or maybe a final goodbye. Because if you mixed up 2 cows for temple tribute with 2 cows for lunch, you just wrote your family's death sentence. Writing back then wasn't just a tool, it was evidence that kept you alive. You might still hate spelling class, but imagine this. You lose 1 point on a test, you lose a scholarship. A Sumerian child writes 1 wrong symbol. The family gets sacrificed to the gods. You write 100 lines as punishment. They had to carve 100 cuneiform marks with a stick on clay, under 113 degrees Fahrenheit sun. And if the tablet cracked, start over. But don't forget, there was a time when writing correctly meant staying alive. And writing wrong meant you'd become the appetizer for next month's festival. You've complained about wrist pain from writing a 2-hour test. Now imagine this. You're in Mesopotamia. The sun's at 109 degrees Fahrenheit. You're squatting on the ground for 6 hours, clay tablet on your lap, wooden stylus in hand, and the assignment is to carve the same symbol over and over until the teacher nods. Clay tablets came in many forms, small ones for practice, large ones for real lessons. Each tablet was as heavy as a paving brick and had to be balanced on your thigh while writing. The stylus, made from hard wood, reed, or animal bone, had 1 sharp end for carving, 1 flat end for corrections. Made a mistake, no erasers. You had to wet the tablet, scrape it off with the stylus, or worse, crush it and start from scratch. Turning in late work here meant remolding your own pain out of clay. No desks, no backrests, no AC, no clean water, no weekends. Only the smell of sweat, the taste of dust, and the sound of sticks smacking tablets, or your hand. Kids who were slow learners got hit. Kids who were fast also got hit if they messed up a stroke. No praise for anyone. Getting punished less than yesterday was a kind of reward. Fingers calloused, wrists swollen. Many students had to quit, not because they skipped school, but because they literally broke their wrists. You might ask, couldn't they teach more gently? The answer, no, because 1 wrong symbol could misplace a warehouse of grain. And misplacing grain meant dishonoring the temple. And dishonoring the temple, no one wanted to deal with that fallout. Bad memory, deal with it. No reference materials, no textbooks to review. Everything had to be memorized and ready to spit out when the teacher pointed to your face and asked, "Where's the symbol for barley?" Some students secretly etched symbols on their arms or carved them into walls at night, like survival spells. You had to memorize hundreds of cuneiform symbols. The lessons weren't just writing. They were copying every sample line, every unit formula, every ceremonial paragraph. One student might write 10 to 20 repetitions a day of, "I will not get the symbol for Enlil wrong again." Some clay tablets archaeologists found are nothing but punishment lines. No complaints, no emojis, just fear, carved by a trembling hand. Each line, curve, tiny difference mattered. The word for meat and sacrificial offering looked almost identical, Miss 1 stroke, klar slap. Miss 2, no lunch. Miss 3 times, maybe no future. Today, you can call in sick for a 99-degree fever. At EW, students weren't allowed to be tired. No doctors, no sick notes. Tired meant weak. Weak meant replaced. Skip class. No phone calls to parents. They dragged you into the courtyard, made you recite old lessons, and if you couldn't remember, public punishment. Ancient records show lazy students were whipped with reeds, starved, or forced into hard labor under the burning sun. Ancient education, essentially, was an early form of military service. The only difference? You fought with a clay stylus. It was a survival contract. You, a 7-year-old child, were expected to endure like an adult. You couldn't say, "I'm tired, I'll rest today," because that might be the day the gods needed a substitute sacrifice, and the uncommitted child was an easy target. You think spelling mistakes lose you points. Spelling mistakes in Sumer could lose you your life. One wrong symbol could plunge your entire family into divine trouble, literally. Because most student texts were about tributes, sacrifices, and property declarations. You wrote 3 cows given to the temple as 3 cows for lunch. Sorry, tomorrow your father's name might be called during the sacrifice. Each cuneiform symbol carried the weight of a decree. One wrong character, and you've changed divine order, accused a village chief, or worse, misspelled a god's name. And when you misspell a god's name, the god might forgive, but the teacher and the priest won't. Some clay tablets weren't for lessons. They were official documents submitted to the temple. According to archaeological findings, many tablets recorded offerings, donor names, rituals, and prayers to gods like Enlil or Inanna. They were stored in temple archives, like in or Nippur, and regularly reviewed by high-ranking priests. One wrong symbol could mean the scribe was charged with misrepresenting divine will, equal to blasphemy. Punishment, death, no appeals. If you were the one who made that error, you'd be accused of falsifying the word of the gods. Blasphemy didn't come with school counseling, just a trial at the temple gates and a sacrificial post waiting nearby. In fact, top students were selected as apprentice scribes for official ceremonial records. They sat beside priests, writing prayers, gift lists, every name line by line. Each symbol had to be flawlessly accurate. But honor came with brutal responsibility. Miss 1 number, 1 stroke, 1 deity name. The ritual failed, and the first to be punished was the one holding the stylus. A clay tablet unearthed in Nippur contained this chilling verdict. The tablet keeper has dishonored Enlil. The community shall offer his blood before the rainy season. No one remembers what the mistake was, only the name carved forever, a warning to every future student. Write wrong, and you'll be written into history. If you wrote correctly, you stayed. You lived longer, ate better, and, most importantly, had the power to prove others wrong. Eyes, scribes didn't need swords. They wielded clay and made people both respect and fear them. One correct stroke could save a village. One wrong stroke could spill blood beneath the altar. You mistype a word in an email, your boss might not notice. In Sumer, 1 symbol wrong, you just signed a volunteer form for sacrifice. Today, a spelling error, lost points. Back then, a spelling error, lost people. Some teachers even carved on wooden boards. A wrong symbol is a sin against the gods. No one wanted their name on the punishment tablet because that name was placed next to the altar. After years of being beaten for mistakes, forced to rewrite for doing it right, and surviving through hundreds of deadly symbols, only a small group remained. They weren't geniuses. They were the stubborn ones, with wrists like carved stone and memories like divine ledgers. And they, the children who survived the clay tablets, became humanity's very first elite class. According to archaeological records from Ur and Nippur, many prominent scribes had private rooms within temple complexes, their names carved in, sometimes even a stylus engraved next to their signature. Some were buried in private graves with offerings and clay figurines, honors typically reserved for nobility. They weren't just scribes, they were guardians of social order, armed with clay and memory. In the ancient administrative system, scribes didn't just write. They recorded laws, contracts, land deals, sacrifice lists, and court judgments. Without them, all disputes would turn into shouting matches, and the strongest voice always won. A skilled scribe could even reshape law just by carving one extra symbol. And once a document was stamped with clay, it became an unshakable truth. Call them scribes, official writers for temples, city-states, and the noble class. They didn't fight wars. They didn't plow fields. They didn't hunt. They sat in the shade, stylus in hand, and decided other people's fates with clay. You underpaid a goat. The scribe wrote 3 instead of 1. Congratulations, you just donated your entire estate without knowing it, because the one who writes correctly is always right. The literate could write contracts, and others couldn't read, so they had to trust you. Record debts, and accidentally add one more symbol. Transcribe divine messages, and tweak them slightly for their benefit. You weren't the king, but you wrote the king's history, and when future generations read, they remembered your handwriting, not the king's face. Scribes didn't just preserve royal decrees and legal codes. They kept life-saving knowledge, how to irrigate fields using canals, how to brew beer, when to plant by the full moon. They recorded star movements, river levels, and how to measure time by sunlight shadows. Without them, humanity might have had to relearn everything every generation. Each line they wrote was an anchor, keeping the memory of an entire community in place. Not because they were smarter, but because they knew when to carve. You know what's strange? In a place ruled by violence, it was writing, persistence, and unbroken wrist that carried humanity into history. The children who once carved symbols in sweat and tears became the ones who wrote down civilization itself. No one remembers the names of the men who killed by mistake, but we still read the clay tablets written by the ones who carved correctly. If you've ever stayed up late studying, watching letters dance on the page, feeling your eyes heavy like a clay tablet, and your mind, like the stylus, growing dull with each line, then congratulations. You and those kids 4,000 years ago shared the same exhaustion. They too fell asleep in the dust. They too were hit for writing wrong. They too had to repeat the same symbol until their hands trembled, their hearts feared, and all they longed for was sleep. And here's the comforting thought. Those very children with calloused hands, hunched backs, and relentless memories left us an entire civilization. Every word in your books, every early law of mankind, every name etched into clay, all came from sleepless nights of study. So if you're lying here now under soft yellow light, with a heart full of unread words and eyelids slowly closing. Then let yourself exhale. Loosen your brow, your wrists, your shoulders, the very places those ancient students once ached. No one's testing you. There's no grade waiting tomorrow. No God will be angry if you forget one math formula tonight. There's only me, sitting by your ear, whispering. You survived another day, and like those children holding styluses long ago, just keep writing. But for now, sleep. Lives of ancient religious founders such as Zoroaster, Laozi, Confucius. Aitin. And now, in the night when no one texts, no one checks in on you, you lie down, open this video, and wonder, am I really alive? Am I okay? Is there anyone who's ever seen this strange world the way I'm seeing it? The answer is yes. 3 men, living thousands of years apart, no social media, no podcast, no group chats to vent, but they also quietly observed the world and thought, do humans just live like this? Is it really hopeless? Isn't there a better way? They didn't speak into microphones. They didn't trend on charts. They just wrote line by line, with ink, with ash, with patient breath in chaotic times. Their names are Zoroaster, Laozi, and Confucius. 3 men who didn't conquer lands, build towers, or invent weapons, yet completely changed how we think about light, water, and humanity. And tonight, if you can't sleep, let them tell you about something bigger than them and bigger than sleep. Outside, sand lashes faces like invisible curses. Winds howl, not cool, but whispering. Even fire fears this place. You stand in ancient Iran, in a land once called Bactria. Sand flies like blades. The sky offers no rain, only wind, dust, and prayers half burned. People here fear gods, not love, just fear. They offer sacrifices, burn animals, murmur to avoid being struck dead during sleep. Zoroaster, then a young priest, stood in that world and asked, if the gods are truly great, why do they demand blood to listen? No one answered. Only fire responded. And from that flame, Zoroaster realized one thing. Good and evil are real forces, and humans, though small, can choose. He wrote about Ahura Mazda, the god of light, wisdom, and truth, and Ahriman, darkness, falsehood, everything that erodes faith. Zoroaster didn't preach by force. He carried only words and fire. Fire, something that never lies. It either burns or it doesn't. He said, every deed you do, every word spoken, every thought held, contributes to the battle between light and darkness. They called him mad, a troublemaker, a young man preaching light in a dark age, always a nuisance, then a prophet, then a target. But the fire kept burning. There is a flame in Yazd-Iran that has been kept alive for more than 1,500 years, protected by silent people, not for legend, but for belief. They don't seek fame or divine favor. They simply rise, refill oil, light the flame, then quietly walk away. Even now, more than 2,500 years later, the Zoroastrian flame must not be extinguished. For them, light is not just a symbol, it is a responsibility. You don't have to be a priest to keep the flame. Just today, you chose to speak truth when staying silent was easier. You chose kindness when no one asked. You are also a lighter of fires. You may not stand in a temple, wear a robe, or chant prayers. But if you believe that choosing what's good is still worth it, even without praise, then you too are by the fire. refilling oil, guarding something silent and precious. In a meeting full of hollow words, you speak something kind. That's you keeping the fire. When you forgive someone who didn't apologize, that's you keeping the fire. Each time you choose truth over convenience, compassion over bitterness, the flame burns brighter. No one sees it, no applause, but the fire burns on. Mist drifts in the air. Dawn is grey. You walk through ancient China's mountains, paths that lead deep into nameless woods. No map, just wind and the faint breath of an ox behind you. Then you see him, an old man riding an ox, wearing faded cloth like mountain stone, hair white as mist. He says nothing. But his eyes, bright as if they've seen everything, and nothing left to explain. He is Laozi, a man who didn't found a school, didn't preach, didn't call followers. He just walked and left behind one book, the Tao Te Ching. Only about 5,000 words. No lesson plan, no tidy conclusions. Just lines echoing like voices in a cave. Water, the most common metaphor, soft yet overcomes the hardest. It doesn't contend, yet prevails. Doesn't boast, yet nourishes all. It flows low, yet nothing lives without it. Laozi wrote, "The highest goodness is like water, not forced, not boastful, not about winning, yet it accomplishes everything." Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. Knowing contentment is true wealth. Water, the softest, conquers the hard. He didn't tell you how to live. He asked you, can you stop striving for a moment and listen to what everything is saying? Laozi lived in an era of constant struggle. Power, land, final authority. The spring and autumn period, when feudal lords vied for power, wars took more lives than ideals. Silence meant useless. Refusing power labeled you crazy. Yet he walked backwards with his ox. He didn't want to be remembered. But paradoxically, those who demand oblivion are often remembered forever. Maybe you live in a world where everyone screams to prove they're right. Laozi closed his eyes, smiled and whispered, "The strong are not forceful. Those who claim knowledge do not know. Those who speak do not understand." And then he vanished from history. Legend says, as he was about to leave China through the Western Pass, a guard, sensing his strange aura, begged him to stay and write something for future generations. Laozi sat, wrote for a few nights, just over 5,000 words. No preaching, no promises. Then he left, never returned. No tomb, no statue, no goodbye livestream. All that remains are those lines, each reading like his footsteps in the forest and the ox's soft breath in the mist. You stand on a red dirt road. Wind blows dust in clouds. Thin children run along the path, fighting over dry vegetable stalks. Beside them walks a middle-aged man, tall, with a wooden staff. His robe is faded. In his eyes, he's not looking for food. He's looking for students. That is Confucius. Born into a turbulent era, the spring and autumn period, where feudal lords waged endless wars, court intrigue was staged daily, and morality was worth less than market vegetables. And he believed in rights and righteousness. Not the kind of superficial etiquette that forces people to bow, but rights and righteousness like threads that hold the world from unraveling. Ren, Yi, Li, Ji, Xin. He repeated them like an endless soundtrack. Like a lullaby for a world losing sleep from killing and bloodshed. No one hired him. No king truly listened. He left the state of Lu to begin a journey through warring states that lasted over 10 years. He traveled to Chen, Song, Wei, Kai, each time hoping a ruler might listen to his teachings on rights and virtue. Once, he and his disciples were starved for 7 days in a forest. Once, they nearly faced assassination. But he never stopped teaching, never stopped believing. He walked from state to state, carrying pupils and a rock, steadfast faith that people can learn to become better, that virtue can be taught, and that if everyone fulfills their role, the world could be at peace. A child fulfilling their duty as a child, a father fulfilling his role as a father, a king living up to the king's nature, a citizen not cheating when nobody's watching. Sound obvious. But in a time when everyone clashed, holding true to one's role was extraordinary. He said little about gods. He promised no paradise. He simply said, cultivate yourself, manage your household, govern the state, bring peace to the world. But it all starts with you. Confucius once served as a high official. At age 50, he became the Grand Minister of Rites in Lu, a post overseeing law and cultural education. In a short time, he did the unbelievable, cleaned up Lu's court, restored rights, and made people begin to believe living well had meaning. But when corruption returned, he resigned. He accepted poverty. He accepted wandering. He accepted being called a dreamer. He once lived in a cold house where disciples had to keep a fire going all night for him. He ate old rice and wore patched robes simply because he refused to bow. Then he died. No power, no grand projects, no monuments. But his teachings were recorded by his students. People like Zigong, Yanhui, and Zhengzi wrote down every word he said, every story, every repeated lesson from their travels. Gradually, they collected it into a small book, not a Bible, but a reminder. These are what the master once believed. It became the Analects, a philosophy, a moral foundation for an entire civilization. Thousands of years later, people still carve his name on steles, build temples, call him Wanshi Shibiao, teacher of 10,000 generations. You know what? You may live in a world where morality is mocked, but if you still believe, even when unseen, unrecognized, doing right is worth it, then you are walking the path Confucius once walked. Not because it's easy, but because if you don't walk it, the world cannot heal. And if tonight you're lying curled up, sighing because you feel too small to make a difference, then remember, a teacher walked roads, carrying a book and belief, and he once sparked an empire of virtue without ever wielding a weapon. There are people who live all their lives to say one thing, but no one listens. Zoroaster was called mad. For the first 10 years, no one listened. Even his family saw him as a threat. He was expelled from his hometown, wandering with his teachings of light and freedom of choice. But no one wanted to hear in a world still loving darkness. Laozi was forced to leave. On his way out of China through the Western Gate, a guard stopped him, not to arrest, but to plead. The guard said, "Please leave something behind." And he, who intended to vanish, sat down, wrote a few thousand words in a few nights, then left. No one ever saw him again. Confucius was rejected by most kings he met. At times, he sat silently all night, staring at a dim lamp, then sighed. My way, no one can follow. Disciples asked if he still believed in what he taught. He only shook his head, not in doubt, but because he knew. Sowing virtues took a long time before a harvest appeared. 3 men, 3 different lives, one thing in common. They spoke truths at the wrong time. Zoroaster called for light when empires were drowning in ceremonial darkness. Laozi asked people to let go when society was mad for control. Confucius called for moral learning when everyone wanted to be king. And the result? No crowns, no triumphs, no applause. Just silence. Have you ever experienced that? That feeling? You speak, and no one pays attention. You do the right thing, and people brush it off with a smirk. You quietly live with integrity and feel utterly alone. If so, you're exactly where you should be, because you are more like them than you think. They too sat alone in the dark, wondering, is there anyone who understands what I'm trying to say? Is there anyone who'll hold these values after I'm gone? Zoroaster's fire was kept for 2,500 years. A Laozi's book, just a few thousand words, brings silence to millions. Confucius's words, copied by hand, passed down from teacher to disciple across centuries. They weren't heard when alive, but their words weren't wasted, because kind words, though slow, still reach beyond time. Not today, not tomorrow, but one day, when someone needs them most. If you're doing what's right, and feel like you're whispering into nothingness, maybe you're not speaking wrong. It's just the world isn't quiet enough to listen yet. A strange thing about history is the loud things often don't last, but the whispers travel very far. Zoroaster, Laozi, and Confucius, they had no microphones, no live streams, no online armies defending them when misunderstood. They had only words, and words are slow, but words never die. There is a Zoroastrian flame kept alive since the 5th century. There's a copy of the Tao Te Ching, rewritten no fewer than 1,000 times. The earliest was not printed or bound, just bamboo slips tied with thorny twine. Each character engraved with a small knife, stroke by stroke. No one rushed, because everyone understood. The deeper the truth, the slower it must travel. Then there's the Analects, transcribed by disciples over successive dynasties. Some wrote on walls in charcoal, some hand-copied on silk, hidden in rock crevices. Some memorized it, not to show off, but for fear of losing it. Each person became a link in a millennia-long chain, just to preserve a few simple teachings. Not because they were famous, but because readers centuries later felt seen. Not by some deity, but by a human from 1,000 years ago, who wrote what they were feeling. Picture yourself as a student in the Han Dynasty. You light an oil lamp, your hand trembling from the cold, copying the words of your teacher's teacher. No pay involved, no praise given. You just fear the words being lost. Or imagine you are the flamekeeper in a Zoroastrian temple. That flame at the Atash Beram in Yazd, Iran, is said to have burned continuously since 470 of the Common Era. Through wars, harsh weather, and forgetfulness, it still lives. Every day, someone refills oil, tends the flame, ensuring the light doesn't go out. Not because you're devout, but because this flame is the last thing people refuse to let die. Empires change, rulers come and go, cities are renamed, but those books still get opened. One line of ink, one punctuation mark. One breath from another century floats across a page and touches your heart. Ren Je I Ren. A benevolent person loves others. Shang Shan Ruo Shui. The supreme goodness is like water. Choose light, not because it's easy, but because it's right. even if no one applauds. You're reading words once deemed useless, but now they are the only kindness you can find. You may not write books, you may not guard temples, you may not teach anyone, but if you hold on to a kind phrase in your heart and pass it on through action, eye contact, a way of living, then you are helping those words keep traveling. Imagine, just imagine, tonight, when you drift off in your dream. You don't know what year it is. Could be 500 before the Common Era. Could be 3 in the morning today. Time doesn't go straight in dreams. It flows in circles, like an embrace holding you so you don't fall out of yourself. A door opens in your dream, not light, not dark, just a place with no car horns, no deadlines, no notifications. There, 3 people sit around a campfire, one in simple white robes, long hair like ink, eyes soft as mist, one with a wrapped head cover, posture like rock, yet eyes ablaze, one in a brown robe, quiet laughter, holding a book without words. Laozi, Zoroaster, Confucius. 3 men not scheduled to meet, from different eras, different languages. But in your dream, no translator needed. Zoroaster speaks first, his voice like burning wood in a hearth. The fire inside his eyes, not because he worships flame, but because he believes light is the only way humans don't devour themselves in darkness. This world, light has not yet won. Laozi looks toward the hazy forest. The wind moves his robe, but he stays still. Trees bend, but he remains upright. Because Laozi understood, those in harmony with the Tao don't need to force. They remain steady. Not won, but not extinguished either. Confucius slowly pours a cup of tea, no one knows from where. In the dream, you hear him teaching, not loudly, not reproaching, just sharing a story and pausing halfway for you to think the rest. As long as people strive to live with integrity, then the Tao still lives. You, standing at the edge of your dream, not daring to step forward, but not wanting to leave either. They don't look at you, but they know you are there. Zoroaster whispers, when you choose light, you do not walk alone. Laozi smiles, eyes half closed. Let go. You don't need to hold everything in your heart. Confucius nods, like a teacher who's seen many seasons of falling leaves. You don't need to be heard. Just don't forget what's right. The flame flickers. The forest falls silent. A single leaf drifts down, like a period in the longest sentence in history. And you wake up. The blanket is warm. Your heart is slightly lighter. Nothing dramatic changed. Just, you no longer feel as lonely as last night. Some think religion is temples, holy books, and solemn rituals. But if you asked Zoroaster, he'd say, religion is the choice you make, light or darkness, each morning you wake up. He didn't call people to worship another god. He only asked, every day, what do you choose, light or darkness? To him, religion was the courageous act of speaking truth among those who remain silent. If you asked Laozi, he'd lift a cup of tea, take a sip, and smile. Laozi never wanted to found a religion. He simply lived like water, flowing low, gentle, not contending. To him, the Tao wasn't something to memorize, but something that doesn't disrupt the natural order of the world. The Tao is not far away. It's found in how you step lightly across a muddy pond. If you asked Confucius, he would answer without hesitation. For Confucius, morality isn't found on an altar. It's in how you answer your parents, in how you treat someone beneath you, even when no one's watching. The superior person does not ask heaven for blessings. They simply do what should be done, even if no one is looking. Religion isn't belief alone, because belief is easy. You can believe in your heart but not live it. You can believe at night and forget by morning. But action, that's hard, because it requires choosing, repeat choosing. No awards, no social media story, no applause. You don't have to be a clergy member. You don't need to master the Tao Te Ching or Analects. You don't need to memorize 101 teachings about light, virtue, or Wu Wei. You just need, when someone lashes out in anger, you don't respond with anger. When someone does wrong, you don't side with them, even in silence. When you see someone lost, you simply, without judgment, say, "There is light here, if you need it." Maybe you feel the world is growing harder to love. Maybe you see people becoming more selfish, louder, more tired. Then you are the quiet lamp that needs lighting. No need to be bright, no need to burn fiercely, just don't extinguish. Zoroaster didn't wield a sword, he wielded light. Laozi never became king, he left. Confucius never won, he taught and let others choose. They didn't fight with beliefs, they fought by living rightly. Religion, ultimately, doesn't lie in words. It lies in how you pass through this world. Did you leave a little light behind? Did you leave a little kindness behind? Did you leave someone sleeping more peacefully because they met you? In school, you learn about wars, who won, who lost, dates, places, events. You learn that Confucius was a philosopher. Laozi was a sage. Zoroaster founded the world's oldest religion. But no one tells you that they also experienced disappointment, loneliness, abandonment in a noisy, rushed world, just like you. No one tells you Zoroaster preached for 10 years. No one believed. Legends say he even lost family because he dared oppose the ruthless blood rituals that everyone revered as sacred. No one tells you, when you choose light, sometimes the closest people are the first to turn away. Laozi was forced to write his book before being allowed to leave the country. No one teaches you that sometimes greatness lies not in victory, but in quietly walking away after leaving what truly matters. He rode an ox through the Western Pass and never returned, as if he knew what needed saying had been said. Confucius, despite a lifetime of advising rulers, no king fully adopted his teachings while he lived. Sometimes he arrived in a state only to be expelled before speaking. Once, he and his students were so hungry, they ate dried leaves under a mountain. No one teaches that in school, because it doesn't inspire in the conventional sense. But it happened. No lectern, no spotlight, just the stubborn belief that doing what's right shouldn't give up, even when everyone else has left. School teaches you to memorize quotes, but also teaches you to spot errors on a test, yet doesn't teach you to forgive real-life mistakes. It teaches you to compare grades, but not how to not envy a friend who scores higher. But no one teaches you to truly feel why those words were said. Ren I ren. But do they teach you how to love a person? Shang shan ruo shui. Does anyone tell you that water itself has been trodden upon? No one tells you that the strongest people in history are those who endure longest, even in silence. They don't shout. They don't argue. They simply repeat what's right, day after day, like water droplets carving rock, slow but enduring. They don't teach this, possibly because they haven't fully learned it either. that sometimes a life well lived does not leave your name in books, but may leave a mark in someone else's heart. You don't need success. You don't need historical fame. You just need to live as if someone is learning from you. And maybe, one day, they'll speak of you, not in books, but in the heart of the next generation. If you're still here, then thank you. Not because you made it to the end, but because you stayed. Maybe you're curled up in an empty room. Maybe you're wrapped in a blanket after a day where no one asked, "Are you okay?" Maybe you're awake, not because of work, not because of illness, but because your mind won't let you sleep. If that's true, then please listen to this. Zoroaster didn't begin with power. Laozi didn't begin with slogans. Confucius didn't begin with authority. They began with loneliness. The truth is, those who change the world are often the ones who feel like they don't belong in it. They weren't chosen by the crowd. They weren't heard. But strangely, they listened to the world very closely. They listened to the cracks inside other people. They noticed the good that went ignored. They believed in what was right, even when no one spoke of it anymore. And then, they didn't keep those things to themselves. They lived, they acted, they wrote. You don't have to do something great. You don't have to start a religion. You don't have to save the world. You only need to be the gentlest person on the day someone is too tired. Be the smallest light on the night someone can't find their way. Be the quiet hand that holds on to goodness when everyone else has let go. If someone needs a place to rest, let your heart be that place. If you need a blessing, then here it is. May you sleep deeply, like kind people often do, after a quiet day of keeping the world lit just a little.